Lesson 18, Side 2.
Two, tense sequence and conditional sentences. Study these examples.
1. Present, future, will.
If I have time, I'll go.
2. Past, conditional, would, could.
If I had time, I'd go.
3. Past perfect, modal perfect.
If I had had time, I would have gone.
Speaker A. Based on the statement of fact, form a question of unreality beginning with an if clause. Speaker B. Answer freely, but in agreement with the statement of fact.
Statement of fact. Listen. 1. We can't go shopping because it's raining. 2. I won't buy an overcoat this year because I already have a good one. 3. Pat won't buy a cassette recorder because she has to save money for her rent. 4. Pat won't go out to dinner with me because she has to work late. 5. I can't leave now because I'm waiting for a phone call. 6. We can't have the meeting today because Mr. Baxter is out of town. 7. Jim and Helen won't be able to travel during their retirement because their savings are gone.
Take the part of Speaker A. Listen to the model. 1. If it weren't raining, could we go shopping?
Yes, of course.
Now you do the exercise. 1. If it weren't raining, could we go shopping?
Yes, of course.
2. If you didn't already have a good overcoat, would you buy one this year?
Yes, I would if I could find one at a good price.
3. If Pat didn't have to save money for her rent, would she buy a cassette recorder?
Yes, she would. She wants one very much.
4. If Pat didn't have to work late, would she go out to dinner with you?
Yes, that's what she told me.
5. If you weren't waiting for a phone call, could you leave now?
Yes, that's the only thing that's stopping me.
6. If Mr. Baxter weren't out of town, could we have the meeting today?
Yes. Unfortunately, we can't have the meeting without him.
7. If Jim and Helen's savings weren't gone, would they be able to travel during their retirement?
Yes, and that's what they were hoping to do.
Change these sentences from present unreality into past unreality. Listen to the model.
1. If I were you, I'd go.
If I'd been you, I would have gone.
If I'd been you, I would have gone.
If I'd been you, I would have gone.
Now you do the exercise.
1. If I were you, I'd go.
If I'd been you, I would have gone.
2. If it rained, we would cancel the trip.
If it had rained, we would have canceled the trip.
3. If I saw him, I could ask him.
If I had seen him, I could have asked him.
4. If you had a car, would you drive to New York?
If you had had a car, would you have driven to New York?
5. If they went to the lecture, they might learn something.
If they had gone to the lecture, they might have learned something.
Fill the blanks with the correct form of the verb. Listen to the model.
Invite. 1. If I had known you were coming, some friends over.
If I had known you were coming, I would have invited some friends over.
If I had known you were coming, I would have invited some friends over.
If I had known you were coming, I would have invited some friends over.
Now do the exercise.
Invite. 1. If I had known you were coming, some friends over.
If I had known you were coming, I would have invited some friends over.
Run. 2. She could have caught the bus if she... a little faster.
She could have caught the bus if she had run a little faster.
Study. 3. If you... harder, you'd be certain to pass the course.
If you studied harder, you'd be certain to pass the course.
B. 4. If I wouldn't think of changing jobs at the present time.
If I were you, I wouldn't think of changing jobs at the present time.
Come. 5. I'll be sure to tell him if he...
I'll be sure to tell him if he comes.
Tell. 6. If you see Mary, her that I asked about her.
If you see Mary, tell her that I asked about her.
B. 7. If we hadn't driven so fast to the airport, late for our plane.
If we hadn't driven so fast to the airport, we would have been late for our plane.
Wait. 8. If you... any longer, the doctor won't be in his office when we get there.
If you wait any longer, the doctor won't be in his office when we get there.
Rain. 9. We would have been there by now.
If it hadn't rained, we would have been there by now.
Have. 10. If it had been much colder last winter, a much more difficult time of it.
If it had been much colder last winter, we would have had a much more difficult time of it.
Three. Relative clause, preposition plus which. Make one sentence from 2. Change the first sentence into a relative clause in which you use a preposition plus which, and join this to the second sentence. Study the models. Listen.
1. He lived in a house. It was built by his grandfather.
The house in which he lived was built by his grandfather.
2. We came in a plane. It was the largest and fastest one I'd ever been on.
The plane in which we came was the largest and fastest one I'd ever been on. Now do the exercise.
1. He lived in a house. It was built by his grandfather.
The house in which he lived was built by his grandfather.
2. We came in a plane. It was the largest and fastest one I'd ever been on.
The plane in which we came was the largest and fastest one I'd ever been on.
3. I read the story in a magazine. It's published once a month in New York.
The magazine in which I read the story is published once a month in New York.
4. We had lunch in a restaurant. It's owned and operated by 2 famous French chefs.
The restaurant in which we had lunch is owned and operated by 2 famous French chefs.
5. He comes from a city. It's in the northeastern part of the country.
The city from which he comes is in the northeastern part of the country.
6. He writes for a newspaper. It's a very old and famous one.
The newspaper for which he writes is a very old and famous one.
7. I parked my car in a garage. It's near the center of town.
The garage in which I parked my car is near the center of town.
8. I paid $400 for a color TV. It doesn't work half the time.
The color TV for which I paid $400 doesn't work half the time.
9. We traveled on a train. It was clean and comfortable, but not terribly fast.
The train on which we traveled was clean and comfortable, but not terribly fast.
10. Mr. Wilmot lives on a street. It's named after his great-grandfather.
The street on which Mr. Wilmot lives is named after his great-grandfather.
4. They elected him president. They asked him to serve. Study these sentences. Repeat, please.
They elected Mr. Long president last month.
They made Miss Stott secretary at the same time.
They named their son Thomas.
I'd like you to tell me about it.
Mr. Jones taught his son to drive a car.
We persuaded them to go with us.
Verb plus noun phrase, object, plus noun phrase, complement. Use the cue and form a second sentence as in the models. Listen.
1. Who did they make secretary of their club? Mary.
They made Mary secretary.
They made Mary secretary.
They made Mary secretary.
Now you do the exercise.
1. Who did they make secretary of their club? Mary.
They made Mary secretary.
2. What did they name their youngest child? James.
They named him James.
3. Who do they consider their leader? Joseph Morrison.
They considered Joseph Morrison their leader.
Four. Who did they elect president of the airline company? Mr. Chang.
They elected Mr. Chang president.
5. What do they call Tom? Shorty.
They call him Shorty.
6. What do you call your boss? Mr. Johnson.
I call him Mr. Johnson.
7. What was Robert called when he was young? Bobby.
He was called Bobby.
8. If they had not elected Mr. Long president, who would they have elected? Mr. Ford.
They would have elected Mr. Ford.
Reading. Marriage customs. From the earliest times, marriage has been an important part of man's legal and religious systems. In addition to the laws governing marriage that each nation establishes, marriage customs have grown up that vary widely from country to country. Anthropologists have studied and written about the numerous marriage ceremonies and customs that exist throughout the world, and they make interesting reading, especially when they differ greatly from our own. Let us look at just one country, the United States, to see some of the customs and the reasons for their existence. Why, for example, do people throw rice at weddings? Why does the bride always wear something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue? People in the U.S., once they meet certain legal age and medical requirements, are free to choose their own mates. Once a couple has decided to get married, the man customarily gives the girl a diamond ring. The use of a ring comes from the ancient custom of using a ring to seal an important agreement. When the wedding day is decided upon, the girl sends wedding announcements or invitations. Friends then send wedding gifts to the girl's home. On the wedding day, it is supposed to be bad luck for the bride and groom to see each other before the wedding. Another old superstition that many people believe will bring good luck to the marriage is for the bride to wear something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. Before the wedding day, the groom always chooses a best man, a good friend to help him and stand with him during the wedding ceremony. The custom of having a best man is thought to have come from ancient times, when a strong friend helped the groom escape from the bride's father. When a couple marries, the groom gives his bride a wedding ring. Many marriages are double ring ceremonies. That is, both the bride and groom exchange rings. The wedding ring is customarily a simple, plain gold band. The roundness of the ring symbolizes eternity and announces that the couple is united for life. The wedding ring is worn on the third finger of the left hand. People used to believe that a vein from that finger ran directly to the heart. At the wedding reception following the marriage, each single girl receives a small piece of wedding cake to take home. She puts this under her pillow that night and dreams about the man she loves. Near the end of the reception, offered by the bride's parents, the bride throws her bouquet of flowers to the unwed bridesmaids. The lucky girl who catches it is supposed to be the next in the group to be married. As the bride and groom leave for their honeymoon, the guests all throw rice on them. This was a symbol of fertility among early peoples. The newly married couple generally leaves in an automobile, which they find the younger guests have often decorated with soap, spelling out "just married" in large letters so that everybody will know. It is also a custom to tie a string of old shoes and cans to the back of the car. Ancient peoples gave or traded shoes or sandals as a symbol of good faith in making a bargain. Many of these customs are much the same in the rest of the English-speaking world.
End of Lesson 18.